everyone, Aaron here from Rudy Visuals. Hope everyone is doing well. And in today's video, we're talking all about film cameras and whether it's worth getting into film photography in 2024. So a few years ago, we bought this. So this is the Canon AE-1, and this was and is still a very popular 35mm SLR film camera that was released, I think, back in 1976 and discontinued in 1984. It sold several million copies internationally and is often regarded as a really good all-around beginner 35mm camera for people who want to get into film but don't really know where to start. There is also the newer AE-1 program, which is a slightly more modern version with a few more modern features like having a mode that chooses the aperture and shutter speed, as well as a few other quality of life improvements in ergonomics and such. I would actually recommend getting that one over this one. But other than that, they're basically the same camera underneath. Now, I'll be completely honest with you, this actually was gathering dust over the past couple of years. We kind of very rarely used it, but recently got back into shooting with this because I kind of wanted to just sort of broaden my horizons, get out of my comfort zone, and basically just see what the fuss is about. There's definitely a very passionate and vocal community, and I have a lot of photographer friends as well who all shoot analog and who are always trying to get me into shooting film. It's also just really interesting to just learn about this whole other side of photography and cameras that I just didn't really know that much about. And I've dipped my toes into it, but I didn't really know fully, especially for someone who learned on a digital camera. And I think when it comes to shooting with modern digital cameras, I do agree that sometimes it can feel like you're kind of shooting in autopilot. So having features like, IAF and being able to take hundreds of pictures on multiple memory cards, have these big, huge raw files that you can just edit in a million possible different ways, being able to just like change the ISO. It's made photography so much easier than it's like ever been in history, which is great. I'm all for accessibility, but at the same time, it can sometimes feel a little bit robotic, a little soulless, like the camera is doing most of the work for you. So one of the things that I instantly fell in love with when it comes to shooting on film is that it really forces you to slow down. Focusing on this camera is all manual. You have to look through the viewfinder, and it uses this system where you've got this little split prism in the middle and you have to line up the two images to get focus. You're also limited to how many shots you have depending on the roll of your film. Usually it's 36 shots, so you can't just kind of like spray and pray, and you really have to take your time to shoot in a more considered and focused way, really hone in on your subject. And that kind of makes you think a lot more about your framing, your composition, the lighting, even like setting the exposure. So the ISO is set by the film that you use, and you get a little light bar on the right side of the viewfinder that tells you what aperture you need to be at to get correct exposure. And at first that can feel really outdated and really old-fashioned when compared to a more modern camera. You kind of realize how easy we kind of have it now with modern cameras, but it makes you realize that this is such a great way to force you to go back to like those ultimate basics, learning about shutter and aperture and exposure. So it's not a stretch to say that shooting analog is actually a great way to learn photography if you're starting out. And while at the same time, this Canon AE-1 specifically, it's a really simple camera to learn on as well. There's no real complexity to it. There's no menu with all kinds of complex and confusing options and settings. There's a kind of a very charming simpleness to it, kind of like when you're driving a really modern car with all these like fancy lane assist and cruise control options, 4-zone climate controls and all these weird buttons on the steering wheel. Then you go back to like a classic bare bones 90s car with just literally a 5-speed gearbox and a barely working radio, and that's it. That's kind of how it feels like to go back to shooting with a film camera, and I really love that simplicity. Really, the only hurdle in terms of operation is just learning to shoot on manual focus. I also love that because it slows you down, everything kind of just feels a little bit more involved. There isn't like a computer chip and software inside this doing all the work for you. You have to physically set everything. There's a really nice sense of satisfaction and accomplishment from just using a film camera like this Canon AE-1 and getting a great set of photos with it. I love that satisfying click of the shutter and having to like wind the film, and also the anticipation of having to wait for images to develop rather than just seeing all your images on your screen straight away. It's kind of this sense of magic that you just don't get with like modern cameras. Of course, another really big reason people love shooting on film is just that really unique look and aesthetic that you can get. And yes, you can replicate that with presets, and you can add film grain digitally, etc. And it can be done with really good results, but in my opinion, there's no substitute for the real thing. Now, if what you're after is like super tack sharp, super clean, high-res images, then 35mm film cameras probably aren't for you. But what you do get is those really beautiful soft colors, the textures and grain, and happy accidents with light reflections that make each image really unique. And even the images that you don't quite nail down focus, it almost doesn't matter as much because it's those imperfections that make the image, as cheesy as that sounds. If you've ever shot a photo on your smartphone, it always seems to add that like really horrible digital sharpening and overly saturated colors, whereas I find with film, it kind of renders images in a much more organic way, almost like the way you'd see them like kind of in those dreams that you get. One thing that I love about the AE-1 and AE-1 program is that it's also really easy to find one of these in good condition. They're not super expensive, although the prices have been slowly creeping up since we bought this one about 3-4 years ago. Nearly every used camera store in London I've been to always has a bunch of film cameras for sale at every price point. This particular camera uses FD mount lenses, so you can pick up these old vintage lenses on eBay. We found this one at a car boot sale. It's not even an FD mount lens, but you can get like adapters on Amazon to easily adapt things. So it's really easy to make lenses compatible with the FD mount lens system. A lot of these cameras on eBay do come with lenses with them, but I would definitely recommend this 50mm f1.4 SCC. It's awesome and it's about $100. I also love the fact that it's quite a good looking camera. It's got that vintage look to it, but I think its design is very timeless. Also the fact that it's an absolute tank, it's actually really quite heavy for a camera of this size. You wouldn't expect it to be this heavy, but it is also famed for being a very durable workhorse. But even if you're not keen on this camera, there's so many great cheap 35mm film cameras out there, from Nikon to Olympus. There's like easier point and shoot style cameras and even slightly newer models that do have autofocus as well. So there's definitely a lot of choice depending on what you're after and your specific budget. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this video, the analog and film camera community is still very active and very enthusiastic. There's loads of like Facebook groups, Reddit pages, community forums with lots of very helpful people if you need advice about something. That's where I got the recommendation to get this particular lens. And we're also really lucky we have a local camera store that we can go to and get our pictures developed, and they've got staff who are really knowledgeable as well, so that's been really helpful as well. Now the question is, am I going to shoot exclusively on film or shoot professionally with film? Probably no. The modern conveniences of modern mirrorless digital cameras kind of dictate that, but I do love that this camera has made me remember why I got into photography in the first place. And when I do have shoots, I do still like to whip this out with me and just get a couple of shots with it in addition to my mirrorless camera. And usually the clients and models that I'm with are always really fascinated by this camera, and it's these pictures that they're the most excited to see. I personally just love using this as well when I'm not under pressure, so like on vacation or trips for my own enjoyment, because they are just so much more fun to use. And ultimately, I think that's the key word. It's just fun, and it's a really fun way to get lost and connect with something from the past that can still create something really unique today. And having invested some effort and time and money into this, I completely understand why people still shoot analog. Now, is there any real practical reason to get into film over digital? The answer is probably no, but so often this hobby is not dictated by practicality or logic. It is driven by more emotional reasons. It's why we buy that classic sports car over a sensible hatchback. It's why we buy a mechanical watch instead of an Apple Watch. It's what makes us human, and I think that's why shooting on film is so enjoyable. It's a challenge, it's playing a game on the hardest difficulty, and that's what makes it so ultimately rewarding. And when that one shot in the entire roll is actually in focus and properly exposed, and you get that great, amazing looking shot, kind of just makes it all worth it. But anyway, that's been my experience of shooting with film in 2024. It's been a really enjoyable, sometimes frustrating, a little bit expensive, but ultimately a really rewarding experience. And for me, it's been totally worth it. So I'd highly recommend, if you're sort of thinking about getting into film, just go to your local camera store, speak to the person behind the counter, find something cheap, something that you can just have fun with, and just go from there. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Do let me know down there in the comments section below if you are shooting film, if you think about shooting film, if it's something that you've never tried before, or maybe if you're a seasoned film photographer, just let me know. If you found this video helpful or enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff that the YouTube algorithm likes. You can also follow us on socials here. It's always great to hear from you guys there. And I guess I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Peace.